Hello, I was doing kind of a Bible study, just kind of doing a little bit of researching, and I came across a question that I wanted to talk about, not necessarily answer, because I don't know if any answer I give would be sufficient to anyone listening, and I can explain that. Why does God hide? If God created the universe, then why did he create it the way that he did? Why is it so difficult to prove he exists? I've heard people say the world is proof that God is, but I don't see how that is logically sound. The existence of the world does not prove God's existence. I don't understand why God makes it impossible to rationalize his existence. I don't think that it's reasonable to expect faith to be the basis for belief because faith cannot reliably determine truth. Also, why did God decide the best way to transmit his message was through a book written by men that is no more reliable than any other man-made book? So actually, it's a lot of questions in one. There's a lot of presuppositions put into that when asking this question. There's a lot of, well, this is the behind it already mentality. So you asking questions, but you're already presupposing answers to those questions when asking the following question in a way. So you kind of got to tackle it one at a time. So why does God hide? According to the Bible, and I have a biblical worldview, so when I view the world, I view it from God down. I don't view it from the world up to God, like we come first and then God is somewhere in the picture. I view God first, and everything the way I interpret things is usually through that perspective. And I'm just going to admit that up front. People can call me stupid if they want. They can say it's the wrong way to view things in a way, and they can make all kinds of arguments. That's fine. A lot of people, when making those arguments, put in presuppositions to what you believe, what the book says. And a lot of people will take parts of the Bible out and be like, well, this is what the Bible says. And there'll be like a paragraph out of context. And I can give an example of something out of context. Someone had a book and they took a sentence out and boom, it says the dog ran. And they're like, see, it says dogs run, and true, it does say that. But if the whole sentence was the dog ran a fever and they just cut out part of it, or, there was surrounding context to what was going on, it can change the meaning of a sentence or the meaning of text. And a lot of times when people are reading the Bible, they have a presupposition of a modern worldview, and they fit what the text is saying from the lens of something that's more modern, instead of from the lens of the people who were writing and or reading it, because things were definitely different then. Traditions, festivals, rationality, everything was different. And I think once you start to understand what is being said, it helps change your mind on what saying too. Anyone can take something at face value and be like, well, this is what it says. This is what it says. This is what it says, which both sides are guilty of that. Christians do that constantly, and people who are arguing the Bible do it constantly as well. So I think, anyone can do it. So when you're having a conversation with somebody, there might be a lot of presuppositions well, this is what you believe, this is what the book says, and this is what this is. And let's be honest, people who are quoting like that from the Bible on both sides typically haven't read the full Bible. There's a lot of Christians who do TikTok theology, or they do Facebook theology, where they get these small little clippets and dang, that's what it says, that sounds good, that feels good, I feel good for the day, and that's it. There's a lot of people who argue the Bible when they research things, they're looking just for the gotcha right there. Got this is what it says, gotcha. That's what they're kind of looking for. Both ways is kind of silly, because in order to understand somebody and their whole worldview, it takes conversation, understanding their content of their heart, and just all kinds of different things. So slapping a label over people where it's this is definitively the way they are, maybe it just takes a little bit of a conversation. There's a lot of people who, on the surface level, slap real quick, things that well, this, because they don't want to deal with you up front or have a personal relationship with you, because maybe they just don't like that you hold those worldviews. It is what it is. I think that through conversation, that's how growth is made. So back to my whole thing. I know it's a little bit of a tangent, and I happen to go on those. Why does God hide? So first off, we were made with free will. God was pleased to give us free will, and in the beginning, God didn't hide. God was actually walking through the garden with Adam and Eve to have a relationship with them. And, he was walking through the cool of the garden. He wanted to be with his creation. He wanted to be amongst his creation. He wanted that relationship. He wasn't hiding at that time. Adam and Eve sinned, which was the disobedience to God, and, when it says there's this tree of knowledge of good and evil. People are like, well, it's knowledge, it's good. Why didn't God want them having knowledge? He just didn't want them, that's exactly what Satan said. But I don't think it was necessarily knowledge of all these different things, like it's a computer downloading good and evil into your head, and you just know things all of a sudden. I don't think that's what it was. Like, by my interpretation, my reading of it, it was the knowledge of good and evil, right and wrong. At this point in creation, God had created everything. Everything was good. Everything was good. Everything was good. He created us with a purpose, and when we're going towards that purpose and we're in communion with him, everything's going to remain good. But the minute we step outside of that purposed creation, it's like, well, that's no good. A knife is good for cutting steak. That's good. It's a good tool. Now, if that same knife was used to hurt somebody, that's a bad representation of it. So we learned at this point in time that we were able to go outside the box because of our free will. We were allowed to create our own. Hey, this is what I want to do. This is what I think is best. God's like, look, I shouldn't eat from that because, beforehand, there's no saying that they weren't accidentally doing things that they weren't supposed to. Like, who knows? Like, when you have kids and they're running around and they do something they're really not supposed to, but they didn't get hurt, and you're kind of like just guiding them the right way. They didn't mean it. It was just something they happened to stumble upon and came at face value, and you get over it. But then there's a point where they're purposely doing it, and that's different. Now, your kid comes up to your cat the first time and squeezes it. Oh, I just want to see it and squeeze it. And you're like, whoa, don't do that. They didn't really do that intentionally. There was no evil malice in them. They just wanted to squeeze it. They didn't know what it was. They were excited. Now, if they go up the next time, like, well, I know I'm not supposed to do this, but I want to see what happens if I squeeze it hard enough. I want to see if its eyes pop out. And they do that, and that's bad, And, up to the point where Adam and Eve sinned, they were fine. And when they ate the fruit, they realized we just disobeyed God. They gained nothing from that, in my opinion, other than the knowledge that we don't have to listen to God. And God never said, you don't have to listen to me. He just told them not to do it. He didn't say, you have to listen to me at this point in time or nothing. He said, hey, you can do anything you want here in the garden, eat from any tree, just don't eat from that one. Don't eat from that one. And, they realized their eyes were open. Boom, the devil lied. We didn't get all this knowledge. We aren't like God. We now know that we can disobey him. It doesn't feel good. And it says they ran and hid themselves because they were naked. And I think to that, like, beforehand, they didn't realize they were naked. No, they knew they were naked. It's just they were covered. They, when they did something, it's kind of like that kid who accidentally squeezes the cat too hard. Hey, you're covered. You didn't do nothing bad. You didn't know. Let me guide you the right way. Versus if you straight up tell your kid, hey, don't squeeze that cat, and they go up and do it anyway. It's a different approach, So they now knew they had done something wrong. They hid themselves because they weren't covered. And, God knew where they were hiding. It says God asked them, where are you? He knew where they were. God wasn't like, this is his chance to like, hey, yeah, you guys made a mistake. Where are you? What did you do? What happened? And well, we hid from you because we're afraid. Well, why are you afraid? And the woman starts off, hey, the snake you made gave me some of this fruit. I ate it, And then the man, like, same thing. Like, the woman you made, she gave me the fruit. I ate it. There's no about accountability, which means there's no sorrow or like repentance in them. I mean, like when your kid comes up to you and like they tell you something and they're like, well, Dad, it's your fault because you didn't do this and you didn't do that. And you can really understand that they're not fully comprehending their role in it. And therefore they're not able to, I don't know, in order to get over it. Like, if you were in a relationship and you cheated on your spouse and you're like, well, yeah, I cheated on you, but that was because, the dishes weren't clean and the bed wasn't made. And, I had nowhere to sleep, had no dishes to eat, I had to go somewhere else, need them clean dishes. I mean, if somebody would have cleaned the dishes, this would have never happened. It's like, there's no accountability, when there's brokenness. And if you look where David is, you fast forward all the way down to David. When he was confronted with something, he instantly broke and realized he did wrong. And like, God, I've sinned against you. I've done wrong. I shouldn't have done that. So God at this point has walked with them. And now he kills animals, which kind of like an animal sacrifice type thing. They killed animals to cover their sins temporarily because God killed them and covered them. you're covered. This blood has covered you, basically. So he killed these animals, gave them clothes, and they were no longer naked, uncovered. Their sins were covered. The payment for the crime for their sin was death. That death was taken by the animals. Therefore, they were covered for the time being. God said, surely you will die, and eventually they did. It wasn't right away, but eventually they did. And so now comes to the point where they're out of the garden, and now you don't really see God walking with them anymore, because there's now a separation. Just kind of like, if you did cheat on your spouse, you can't be like, well, we can still sleep in the same bed, and there'd be a distance, and there is a huge distance because we're outside of creation, we're outside of what we're doing, and now we have a gap and a distance. And if you read the Bible and you follow it, and that's why I said context is important, start reading it. God is talking to people, then he's doing works throughout his actions, and he's even having prophets tell him this is what God's going to do for you. And slowly there's a distance that God's created. God's like, at one point I walked with you, but now it's like I'm showing myself in different ways. And I wouldn't say God hides, but God has lessened his role directly. And there's a lot of people say sin can't exist with God. It just doesn't happen. Exactly. Sin can't exist in the same space. I mean, honestly, if we were on the holy courtroom, which eventually, if you read the Bible, there is a court case, like a holy courtroom, where Satan's up there and he's accusing somebody, and they're covered in white linens that was given to them by Jesus. They're covered by it. So, they're able to enter the presence of God now, and they're able to exist in the same space as God. But now that we're separate outside of our purpose and imperfect, we can't exist in the perfect world God's created for us. We can't exist in that perfection that God originally created for us, because now we have our free will. We bring our own malice in there. A lot of people are like, well, they view God morally through lenses of, humanity. And our morality has changed. Our thoughts have changed. All kinds of things have changed. And, we sometimes put God on our level, like this is our standard. But if you do believe in a God, if you have that worldview, which I do, you would say that God's above us. His thoughts are above us. Everything's above us. It's like we can't comprehend. And in the long run, in my life, my own personal story, my testimonies, there's been times where I've been making my own decisions and, going against what I know, what God wants to do. I can feel the Holy Spirit convicting me, and I'm just like, nope, I'm going to do it my way because this is what feels good. This is what I need to do. And eventually when I get to the end of it, I'm like, oh, this is why I shouldn't have done that. This is why it was important to come to God and listen to what those feelings were telling me, because it would have led me to somewhere better. And, the more I get in the Word, the more I read, the more that lights up inside of me, and I can feel that when I'm making decisions. But anyway, so I think that slowly we become distant from God. Why does God hide? I don't think God hides at all. I think that a lot of things in my biblical worldview are very evident. I do believe, he brings in like the world isn't proof of the existence of God. I believe that, if there is a watch, there's a watchmaker, and I think in order to create something like the world and the universe, time, space, and matter, you'd have to be outside of that to create it, outside of our comprehending in like a dimension, like science says about the fourth dimension, fifth dimension, who knows how many dimensions there are, but there's definitely something beyond our perception. And I think a lot of worldviews agree on that. I think God is in that category. It's beyond our perception. So why does God hide? I don't think God does hide. I think he shows himself in different ways that are gentler. And I do believe that if he created the universe, why he created it the way he did. I think God created the universe in perfect harmony. Our free will ended up disrupting it. And if God were to force perfection on us without free will, we'd all be like just robots, just functioning and doing whatever. And it's like, nobody wants to be in a marriage where it's like your wife just does whatever you tell her to, and she just does everything perfectly. It's like, I want her because of her personality, because of what she brings to the table, and just who she is overall. So those thoughts and that who she is brings our relationship closer, because that's what I want in my life, and that's what she wants from me. She doesn't want just a man just like, yes, babe, I will do this. I will take the trash out when you have wanted me to on my regularly timed schedule. She wants a man who she can talk to, feel her thoughts. And God wanted relationship with his creation. God created us with our own minds so he can have this relationship, so we can have this understanding. And I think in my worldview, that's why, the universe was created perfectly. It's just us. Why doesn't God show himself? I think he still does. I don't think that's really an issue. Why is it so difficult to prove he exists? I mean, from our limited perspective, I think it's hard to prove anything truly is anything. I mean, even if you have I believe in evolution kind of thing, there's no way to actually go back and say this definitively happened. We can have things that point that way, but in the end, you're going to have to take faith. This is the best guess judgment we can have on this. Just like Christians are taking, this is the best faith judgment I can have on this. It's the same. I think the mind process works the same way. So I don't think it's necessarily difficult to prove he exists. I think it's difficult for anything to exist. And I think that's where faith comes in. I've heard people say the world is proof. Well, I think that creation screams to God. I think it's pointing to God. And I think when you find beauty in life, you have those breathtaking moments, like you go see the Grand Canyon or something, and you're like, wow, you realize how small you are at that point in time. And I think that when you're that small and you realize you're that small, it makes you think about the bigger picture and like what else is beyond this beauty and this giant and stuff like that. And I feel like a lot of people don't get out anymore. They don't really see those sights. Some people do, and it doesn't change their opinions. But I think a lot of times, in my opinion, video games, you get like these awesome, breathtaking video games, but it's not real. And you're kind of like, yeah, I'm impressed by it, but I'm still sitting on my couch. It's like there's a lack of experience that leads to those moments where you understand how small you are in the scheme of things. And I think that creation and the world does point to God. It's his opinion. You can't prove it, can't not prove it. Then I don't understand why God makes it impossible to rationalize his existence. I don't think it's impossible to rationalize it. I think that we've trained our minds to believe and act a certain way, and sometimes we just got to open that box and explore things and really, like I said, there's a lot of presuppositions in this question, and I think that we have to look beyond that. I don't think it's reasonable to expect faith to be the basis for belief. Like, I think in the end, our whole world is operated on faith. I mean, even when you're driving on the freeway and there's two-way traffic, boom, 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 you have faith that this person's going to stay in their lane, and that makes you feel comfortable driving on this side so you don't have a head-on collision. When you eat your cereal in the morning, you have faith that the FDA, Federal Food Association, FFA, did their due diligence and made sure there was no like poison or anything in what you're eating that's acceptable for you to eat. I think when you're putting shampoo on your head, obviously I don't, but you're trusting that it was regulated to the point where there's chemicals in there that's not going to make your hair fall out or burn your scalp or something like that. I think our whole existence operates on faith in some way, shape, or form, and that can be applied to anything. I don't think Christians are exempt from that logic. I don't think that one is better than the other. So, and then also, why did God decide the best way to transmit this message was through a book written by men that is no more reliable than the other man-made book? And I think that the fact that the Bible is written by men is a beautiful thing to an extent. I think it's all God-breathed. And I think that what's beautiful about the Bible versus other testaments and stories is like the Bible uses very flawed people. And I mean, there's things in the Bible that are just atrocious out of context. Even in context, you're like, well, that's crazy that this happened. But God's using flawed people. I mean, even David, he did some pretty shady things, murder, adultery. Once got angry, he was going to go slaughter a whole clan of men just for it. And I think that God used these people that, typical myths and stories and religions would be like, no, I have this heroic figure and he's going to do everything and do the right thing. But basically, God used a bunch of broken men, had them accomplish things through God's power, and there's a part of the Bible where God says God's power is made perfect through other people's weakness. God uses what's weak to shame the powerful, or what's dumb to shame the smart kind of thing. And God used very flawed men to show us another way when it says, why does God hide? God used that to show us that he's still here and he still exists. And so I think that God has shown himself through that, and I think that the book is just more evident of that. And like the things I've done in my life, even in my own testimonies and stuff, is like there's a lot of times where I did not have the power to make it through certain things, or I didn't have the ability to, and somehow pulled through. I really put my faith in God, and I was like, well, there's nothing else I can do, God, but rely on you and do this. And I did it, and it worked, or it worked out for the better in some way, shape, or form. And so other stories have their hero doing all this heroic stuff, Hercules killing Medusa and all this kind of stuff. There's a lot of psychology in the Bible where it's like, man, these broken men, and like they're learning from their mistakes. And I think that a lot of times, even in today's modern world, when you learn from your mistakes and you're growing and you're changing, you start to develop into a wiser person. And a lot of my stories, a lot of my testimonies, like I didn't do anything impressive, trust me, and I made huge, huge mistakes that I can never take back and that I regret every single day. But through those mistakes, God's used me for other things and used those choices and those times to grow me into a stronger person and a better person. So is it more reliable than any other man-made book? I would say yes. I mean, the way the Bible survived, the way it's been brought through, that's, a lot of people do quick online searches, pop, 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 done. This is it, and there's a lot of misinformation and stuff. But if you actually do a legit study on how the Bible survived through scribes, how it was written, how it was translated, all this other kind of stuff, and the power in the different translations too. I mean, sometimes there's different words used that aren't necessarily as accurate, but when you look at all of them, there's just so much ways to study the Bible, and you start putting those into place, and it's the Bible is like a growing book, and you can never just be done reading it. I've read the Bible cover to cover. I've read it book by book, different orders and stuff like that. And it's like I read it again and again, and I still find new things every single day. So is it more reliable? Is it not reliable? I don't know. And I don't think I necessarily answered this person's question. And I think I mentioned that at the beginning. It's not necessarily going to be an answer. It's just going to be kind of like a thought and discussion, opening up that to the idea of like, there's more than just putting these presuppositions in, of a faith. And a lot of people, like I said, they don't understand it. They don't understand the meaning, the context, anything, and they kind of put all their own thoughts and ideas from a mindset of today's world. So that's it. Like I said, it wasn't really a big, like, I've answered this question and I know more than this person asking the question. Just being honest. Like, I don't have the necessary answer. I do have the faith to back up what I believe in and to believe in what I believe in. And I am open to having these type of conversations. Like, I mean, someone can sit here and say this to me and argue it to my face, and that's fine. I appreciate that, and I actually welcome it because I like having those type of conversations. I think that is a way for a lot of people to understand things a little bit better. So anyway, this is kind of what I just kind of came across I wanted to talk about. It's nothing too big. Hope everyone's having a great day, and God bless you.